What up, Dodgers Nation? D-Mac here, and he's back by popular demand. Mr. Casey Porter. He's forgotten more Dodger baseball than most fans will ever know. A prospect guru. You can check out his stuff at Dodgers Daily. Casey, we appreciate having you back, my man.
D-Mac, I appreciate you bringing me back in. It's always a pleasure, and every time I get a chance to talk to you, I always like to tell you that you are no doubt Dodgers Nation, and you yourself, definitely the best Dodgers content out there. So super excited to be on your show.
Hey, man, I appreciate that. Hey, every time we have a post-game show, the comments are always like, you got to get Casey back on. You got to get Casey back on. So definitely the fans, you asked for him and you got him. So, Casey, it's that time of the year. It's the quiet before the storm. The postseason is on the horizon. The division has been locked up. This team's about to win their 10th NL West tie on the last 11 years, 11 straight postseason runs, but a very different feel this year heading into the postseason compared to last year. Last year, 111 wins, franchise record, high expectations. This year, still running away with the division, but based on everything that's happened, the injuries, the off-the-field stuff, it feels like this is the underdog Dodgers heading into this one. Just before we kind of get into some of the prospects that we'll talk about later and some of the rotation questions, just kind of what's your general outlook of where this team is heading into October?
Well, if I had told you, hey, okay, in the offseason when you went and got Noah Syndergaard, when you got J.D. Martinez, you re-signed Clayton Kershaw, you got Shelby Miller, if I would have asked you at that point, if everybody stays healthy, the Dodgers win 95 games and win the division by double digits, would you have taken the under on that, even if everybody stayed healthy?
Yeah, no, it was a Hollywood script. This is a success story no matter how you try to frame it. I mean, when you look at the losses, you mentioned Noah Syndergaard. He was a bust, right? You look at the injuries they sustained. You look at their opening day rotation. You don't have Tony Gonsolin. You lose him. Tommy John. Second, serious surgery for Dustin May. You lose him. Walker Buehler doesn't return. Julio Urias, he's arrested on felony domestic violence charges. So really what could go wrong did go wrong for the starting rotation this year. And on top of that, Clayton Kershaw was on his way to having his best year in years. He's probably going to start his second consecutive All-Star team, and he goes down with a shoulder injury. But somehow, some way, this organization, thanks to their depth, thanks to some timely moves, you bring in Lance Lynn, who first couple starts, he does bolster that rotation and does eat innings, and it's really magical. I mean, I don't think it really gets talked about enough. So, yeah, credit to this organization. I really think we're going to look back 5-10 years from now, Casey Porter. If we win the World Series, that'll be the talk. And if we do, it'll be because of this man in large part. And I think you're going to look back at 2023 as the Bobby Miller season, the season that Bobby Miller emerged and really became that ace for the Dodgers, right? Hopefully that's the case. I was talking to Adrian Gonzalez yesterday, and I said, hey, Adrian, fill in the blank. The Dodgers win the 2023 World Series if, and he said, no hesitation, if Bobby Miller can be the ace that we think he could be. Now, first question I want to ask about Bobby Miller is, do you think we need to recalibrate expectations? I'm going to throw some of his numbers at you in a second here, but do you think the expectations are a little too high at the moment, or do you think that he's ready for this opportunity that's ahead of him?
100% ready for the opportunity. When we talked about him before, the one thing that I told you that he was emotional, and that can be a blessing and a curse. Hey, man, when he's riding that thing high, the thing's going 101, and he's throwing that slider, he's throwing that changeup, he's throwing the curveball, he's throwing it. And sometimes, early on, his first couple of starts, he threw that sinker that was taking the right turn. But then it can also be a curse because I'm just telling you, man, he gets frustrated when he doesn't execute a pitch. And obviously those roller coasters are something that throughout a major league season, you learn to work through and you learn to not have because, hey, you got to be even keel because there's so many different outings. It's such a game of failure. That's the hurdle that Bobby Miller has to overcome. That's going to be on steroids in the playoffs because everything matters that much more. And I'm super excited. We know he's competitive enough, but is he going to be mature enough? That's why I was so pleased with Ryan Pepio the other night. It wasn't his best performance in terms of, the production and maybe the numbers he gave it, the two home runs and the 4 runs. But it was the first time at the major league level that he showed when he got in trouble, he didn't try to strike everybody out. He kept his stuff in the strike zone. That's what he's being asked to do. He stayed efficient, and then he grinded through 6 innings. So the question's going to be when Bobby Miller in the playoffs, when he has all this adrenaline, when he's throwing the ball 101 miles an hour, is he going to be able to handle those swings of emotions? Nobody knows at this point. Nobody's ever seen Bobby Miller in a Major League Baseball playoff. We have seen him at very, big time stages. I saw him go against Jack Little, I think's his name, the Vanderbilt pitcher, That was the number one. Jack Leiter, excuse me. In one of his very first outings in Tulsa, it was a Saturday night. It was a huge environment. He was amped up, and he just wiped the stage that night. It was just fantastic. Saw him there. We saw him at Louisville on big stages, but none of that's even going to compare to what Major League Baseball is going to give him. So I'm excited to see that. Definitely competitive enough. We'll see that if he's mature enough to handle that big moment. So, hey, I've said many times and I've told you this, Bobby Miller, 101 miles an hour, 4 different pitches. He's at his best, Doug, when he's averaging about 98, because when he's averaging 98, he's getting a little bit more movement. He's locating a little bit better. He's not getting behind in counts, and he's not having to throw up pitches that are hittable. So that's kind of been his sweet spot. So we'll see if he can hit that in the postseason.
Yeah, you absolutely nailed it right there. I think you can talk about the talent, and that's undeniable. I mean, if you were going to create an ace-level pitch, if you were to go into a scientific lab and try to make one from scratch, you'd have all the physical attributes and the skill set of a Bob Miller, the height, the strength, the velocity, the fact that he's commanding 5 pitches and he's doing it at the big league level as a rookie. That's what you would want. But the one thing you can't quantify, the one thing you can't account for at this stage is how he's going to handle the pressure of a postseason game. And I think it's obvious right now. I'd bet a shiny nickel as far as how everything's lined up. It's aimed towards him getting the ball there in game 1. Can he handle that? Is he going to go 88 Hershiser? Is he going to go 81 Fernando Valenzuela? I think those are unrealistic, especially when you consider that you're not going to see him 4 times through the order. Probably not going to see him very many times, 30 times through the order, depending on how efficient he's going to be, right? So I think it's just getting off to really good starts and setting the tone. I think for me, as far as handling his emotions, kind of makes me think of what Greg Maddux said back in the day. He said, don't try to make the perfect pitch, try to make a good pitch, right? It's about whip, it's about win. What's important now? And I think that's the important thing for Bobby Miller, just focusing on executing the very next pitch. You see, when he does get into trouble, it's when he's falling behind counts. And the stuff is still nasty, but it's a 3-2 count at that point, right? Or they're sitting on something and he doesn't execute a pitch. But next question I have for you for Bobby Miller is, look, so far, 101 and 2/3 innings, a 3.98 ERA. Last 9 starts, a 3.59 ERA. He's held opponents to a 2.27 average. All those numbers are really nice, especially for a rookie. But do you think that he's at risk of hitting a rookie wall, or do you think that physically he can handle this and that's not going to be an issue?
That's interesting you say that, because basically the last day he was in Oklahoma City, I was doing interviews. I was sitting in the bleachers before I was able to go down on the field and do interviews. And he was running the bleachers there at Bricktown Ballpark for like an hour and a half. And this dude, I'm just telling you, man, there is no human being on earth that is in better physical condition than Bobby Miller is. And I think the thing that we have working for us, Doug, he got ramped up late. He didn't start till May, June, something like that. So, it's not like it's been going all the way back until, February, March, April, and all those innings are accumulating from that perspective. So I have absolutely zero issues as far as Bobby Miller hitting that wall, especially when you consider the adrenaline that he's going to get from a playoff start. I have no issues there.
I'm telling you, we're going to see the first 200-mile-per-hour fastball in big league history. Bobby Miller plus adrenaline plus the postseason. I pray that he doesn't break Will Smith's hand on his first pitch of the game. So, yeah, I'm very excited about that. And I think you bring up a fantastic point. I think it also rings true for Ryan Pepio, is that there could be a freshness to these arms. I think they're going to have a lot of gas left in the tank, and I think these guys are ready to ascend and emerge. And I think that Bobby Miller, he has what it takes. I think that the ultimate silver lining this year is that they fast-track their way to an ace. If everyone's healthy this year, Bobby Miller's probably making some late appearances, and we're seeing flashes. But the fact that, okay, this was baptism by fire, it absolutely fast-tracked that process. And I think you know this better than anyone. Some players, you throw them at the big league level. If they have the talent, that light switch is going to turn on, and it did in a big way for Bobby Miller.
Bad dogs bite when they're pups. Hey, if the guy's good, he's going to show you he's good right off the bat. Here's another advantage that we have here, D-Mac. I was there in 2019 when Will Smith, he caught Clayton Kershaw when Clayton Kershaw was doing a rehab. And I can tell you that was a big environment. There were 11, 12,000 people there. People were crawling everywhere. And Will Smith, you have to believe, was, he wasn't the Will Smith we know now. He was just the Will Smith. He was a big prospect, but he was Will Smith, the AAA guy, right? Okay, so here comes this big Clayton Kershaw guy, and you have to know he was bright-eyed, bushy-eyed, a little bit nervous. And I can tell you he did such a good job catching Clayton Kershaw that Clayton Kershaw actually, when he came up, wanted Will Smith to catch him because he felt that comfortable with Will Smith. So here's the advantage we have. Will Smith, the catcher that these guys are throwing to, has been through what these guys are going through as recently as 2019, as far as having those nerves, knowing what it's like breaking into a lineup full of all-stars and holding your own like Will Smith did. So I think that experience that Will went through is something that is invaluable to a guy like Bobby Miller, because Bobby Miller can look at him and Will can go, hey, dude, I know how you're feeling. This is how we deal with this. Trust me, brother, we're going to get through this. And I think that's going to really help.
I do too. I think that's a great point as well. And then when you look at this pitch mix, what makes I think it very fascinating with Bobby Miller is everyone knows about the velocity. Everyone knows about the gas. 99.2 miles per hour. That's what he's averaging on the four-seam fastball. That's tops at the major league level for a starting pitcher. But it's the pitch mix. It's the sinker, the curveball, the slider, the changeup. And that curveball, that's been his put-away pitch. The slider, the changeup. He's definitely relied on those secondary pitches. Why do you think you haven't seen as much dominance as far as swing and miss and strikeout ability with that four-seam fastball?
Well, I think, first of all, I think he likes to work his off-speed stuff in the counts a lot of times where you could get a strikeout with that four-seam. So I think the four-seam gets you ahead in the count. You just throw it for a strike. The thing about that pitch for him is that it is such a good pitch. He doesn't have to be necessarily fine with it, Doug. All he has to do is rear back and throw it. Whereas if it's an 0-2 count, you're asking him to throw a 101 mile an hour pitch and then also locate it, that kind of deal. Whereas, if you take a curveball, you can match the way that he's just able to just let it rip with two strikes. That makes sense. So, hey, to get ahead in the count, let's not try to be fine. Let's not try to be perfect. Let's just rear back and let one rip about 101 miles an hour. And that's something that he's able to do. Then with two strikes, you can just say, hey, let's not be fine necessarily trying to hit a certain location. Let's just throw your curveball, let it come out of your hand like it's natural to you. Let the movement of the pitch work, and I think it removes, I think it gives him margin for error to go with that type of pitch sequence. So I think that's why you've seen that.
Yeah, I think he's like a young superhero, right? Just getting used to having those superpowers. And I will say, I've seen people on Twitter, people out there, that four-seam fastball, it's not playing up. Hey, last time I checked, when they play the Braves, he threw that four-seam fastball right by Ronald Acuna Jr., a guy who could win the MVP this season. So he definitely has that in his bag. Now, next pitcher I want to talk about is Ryan Pepio. So some stuff on Pepio, I find it very interesting as far as his postseason role. I think he's got a lot riding on this last couple weeks of the season. The results have been there, 2 ERA, expected numbers close to 4. But I think his last start really encouraging. 5 punch outs, 14 swings and misses. You're seeing better use of that slider. He's commanding the zone more. How much confidence do you have in Ryan Pepio heading into October?
Well, I have total confidence. He was the all-time strikeout leader at Butler. I got to see him a lot at Tulsa, and I got to see him a lot in situations to where it didn't always go great for him. There were some outings there where I saw with my own eyes where he gave up a couple of home runs early. And I saw him bear down, buckle down. And then really what he did and what we've seen, Bobby Miller do from time to time, that's been super impressive. Instead of just trying to throw it through a brick like a lot of young guys do, he actually turned to his off-speed stuff. He had that much confidence in his changeup at the time. And, hey, I know you talked to him recently. What a great interview that was. I got to talk to him in the offseason. He said that he did a lot of work to his body. If you've noticed, he's a lot trimmer, and he's able to access the zone with his body, get his body in positions to access the zone better. The difference for him, though, the two things from a mix perspective for his pitches, he's eliminated a little bit of the right turn to his changeup, a little bit more tumble. That's allowed him to keep it in the zone better. And then he's taken his slider and he's given it different shapes. So if he needs to throw for a strike, it's a little smaller. It looks like a cutter. If he needs to strike out and a swing and miss, he can make it a little bit bigger and make it look more like a curveball type pitch. He's been able to do that. And those, so he's been able to add elements to his mix and keep the back big, but also, build in there, some elements to it that allow him to be consistent as far as throwing strikes. That's been the difference for him. I think that's here to stay. I think he knows that's here to stay. I think that's given him a world of confidence, and I think we would all have to agree. Just watching Ryan Pepio. And hey, Doug, I've been the number one advocate. The ERA actually looked good last year. He was not efficient, but bottom line, he got himself out of jams because his stuff is big and it plays at the major league level. Having said that, I think we would all have to agree he just looks different when he's pitching this year in terms of his command of the mound.
Yeah, mound presence is night and day better. He looks physically like he's in the best shape of his life. Looks like he's conditioned to really take on this opportunity. And you mentioned that slider. I was talking to him about that slider. You mentioned the different shapes. Sometimes it appears like a cutter. He always needs something that kind of turns left. Yes. And that's really been the key difference in my eyes. This year on the slider,
100%.
Velocity's up, averaging 88.6 miles per hour. So that's where you get that cutter look to it. And then also just the overall success. Last year, opponents hitting 300 on that cutter, slugging 533. This year it's down to 71, slugging 71. So would you say that's the biggest difference from year one to year two is the effectiveness of that slider?
100% the effectiveness of that slider. And it's because he's able to get ahead in the count with it. And then he's able, like I said, to shape it differently with 2 strikes. And Doug, what that's done, it's got him ahead in the count. I don't know how many times last year it was 2-0, it was 3-0, it was 3-1. And you're just sweating bullets, and as much as for a prospect guy like I am, that's talked to him on so many different occasions and gotten to watch him pitch, hey, man, you get attached to these guys. You go and you watch their grind and you just root for them like a Gus Varland, man. You're just like, come on, Gus. This is, you've seen him in that double-A dugout so many times with his headphones on and just grinding and never, you can see he's thinking, hey, am I ever going to make the major leagues? So you see this grind for these guys, then you see him get your chance and you're just, it's an amazing feeling. It's nerve-wracking, exciting, all in one. I can only imagine what it's like for them. So, I've had that experience with Ryan Pepio. So, there's a lot of experience there as far as to say, I've seen where he's come from. I see where he's at right now. And there's absolutely no doubt about it that getting ahead in the count with that slider, that's allowed him to go bigger with 2 strikes instead of having to go smaller with 2 balls, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, no, you're definitely spot on as far as the attachment you get interviewing these guys. Every time I interview one of these guys, I'm like, oh, gosh, I'm going to be a softie. I got to be a homer to everything. I got to support them. They strike out 5 times. I'm still supporting him, and the same thing goes with Ryan Pepio. You couldn't root for a guy more just based on his character. So, yeah, I could not be happier about the success that he's had. I actually told Pepio, because before the season, I told him he's going to be my rookie of the year. And I told him when I had my interview, I was like, hey, man, I need you to throw like 3 or 4 perfect games late here to just make a case for that rookie of the year. And I don't know, maybe that was why he took that perfect game of the 7th. I don't know, Casey. But how do you use Pepio in the postseason, though? Do you have him as a guy who starts the game? Do you use him in a piggyback start with a Ryan Yarbrough? What would be your attack plan with Pepio in October?
I would definitely let him start. I don't think there's any doubt about it. And the reason is, hey, if you go to the last game that he threw in Oklahoma City, what I like to do whenever I cover these guys that are either on rehab and or, they're the big prospects, I like to cover their whole entire process for the day, whether that be from running to stretching to their flat work, to their throwing their heavy ball against the wall, to all their stretching, to their bullpens, and then eventually to their action in the game. So here's the problem with that. Now, I haven't seen him piggyback this year much. Okay. The problem with piggybacking is you take all of that away from him. That routine as far as, okay, well, we're going to go stretch here. We're going to play flat work here. You're going to throw long toss here. Then you're going to go throw the heavy ball at this time. Then you're going to throw your bullpen, and then we're going to go out and we're going to dominate. That is a routine that he's going to have nerves. And so the more that you can get him in a familiar routine that he's comfortable with, I think that the less the nerves will be. I think if you put him in a situation that he's not able to have that routine, he's going to be able to handle it. Don't get me wrong, but I don't think it's optimal as if you gave him that routine. That's my opinion.
Yeah, no, I think that's something that doesn't get talked about enough. These guys are stickler for their routines. Their body clocks go off at certain times. You've heard Clayton Kershaw talk about, he has Golden Graham cereal every day when he starts. He knows exactly the time, down to the time of the hour, when he's going to take a little 10-minute nap. So to take that from these guys, I think it's very difficult to throw them into these situations. Being a bullpen guy, being a reliever guy, we know that most cases you were formerly a starter, but you had time to kind of transition into that role. Now, that's why I kind of found it funny to hear Walker Buehler's comments when they asked him if he could still help this team coming out of the bullpen. He said, hey, look at my ERA coming out of the pen at 11.32 ERA. These guys that are doing it could probably do a better job than me. So, yeah, I don't think that does get talked about enough. Now, we look at this starting rotation as a whole, though. This year they used 16 different starters, Casey. That's fewer than only the Oakland A's who use 22, the Royals 21, the Reds 17. 5 of the 16 are rookies. So it's pretty amazing that they've gotten to this level with this current iteration. I think one of the big X factors is Lance Lynn. I think when they made the trade for Lance Lynn, it was about, okay, bring on a Pac-Man pitcher, some guy that can eat innings. Let's drive him like a rented car and just get as much mileage as we can out of him. But now he stepped into a position where they might need him to make a big pivotal postseason start. Last 8 starts, a 4.6 ERA with the team, 7 innings of 2-run ball against San Diego Padres. Are you feeling better about him after that start? Because the previous ones, they were rocky. I mean, last 2 starts, 15 runs in 9 innings. In his last 4 starts overall, he struck out only 6 batters in 22 innings while allowing 9 home runs. But did you see enough in that start against the Padres to say, okay, I feel better about him potentially getting a start, maybe in the NLCS it goes that far, or at some point during the NLDS?
I see a Lance Lynn that could go 6 innings and give up 2 runs and give the Dodgers exactly what they need in a playoff scenario. Let's get one thing straight about Lance Lynn. He has experience. He's not going to be nervous. And, okay, he has a dog mentality, man. This dude thinks like a dog, man. Now, he doesn't always pitch like a dog because he's getting a little bit older, right? So that's kind of where it kind of goes sideways from time to time. But you're going to get a guy that's going to go out there and make, typically speaking, he's going to give you a professional start. It's very valuable in the regular season because it gives you length. That's not as valuable in the postseason because you need quality more than you need quantity at that point. So I think there's going to be a short leash on Lance Lynn. I don't think there's any doubt about it. Now, here's the advantage that I think that the Dodgers have with him, and the reason why they are going to continue to try to make him a starter in the postseason. They like the right turns to the changeups. They like the left turns to the sliders. They like the high-riding fastballs, and they like the tumbling changeups. He has that pitch mix. That's why they identified him. That's why they thought they could fix him, of which they did for a while. And that's also a pitch mix that I think, in my opinion, that the Dodgers call pitches to better. That's the type of pitcher they work with the best. That two-seam guy that works the bottom of the zone, that relies on movement, that guy's not always as successful in this system, at least immediately, because I don't think that's what the Dodgers believe in. So he has the type of mix that the Dodgers work with very well. So I think as we continue to move forward, the Dodgers are very hopeful that they can continue with that mix and, with that experience he has, and make him somebody that can be very productive for them in the playoffs. Because if they can get that veteran start from him and Kershaw, that takes so much pressure off of Bobby Miller and Ryan Pepio and allows them to relax, and then they can just do their thing.
Yeah, that's a fantastic point, and you mentioned it right there. He does have all the shapes. He does fit the mold for what the Dodgers look for when it comes to starting pitchers. Just like on offense, you want a batter that does expand the zone, they can hit for some power. Same thing goes for a starting pitcher, and Lance Lynn definitely has those. It's just a matter of execution. I think I like seeing him work lower in the zone like he was, working on the black right there. And I think for him, just the big key is just going out there, like you said. Sometimes for older guys that have been in this league, guys that have accomplished a lot in this league. I mean, I don't think some newer Dodgers fans realize this guy's an all-star. This is a guy who was finished third in this Cy Young Award voting. This is a guy the Dodgers were interested in trading back in 2020 when he was on the Texas Rangers. They've had their eyes on Lance Lynn for quite some time. And I think older guys like that, like you say, got that dog. You root for him, man. You root for him to just have a signature start in the postseason. Just say, okay, forget the ERA. Forget the fact that he served up 41 dingers. Okay, I mean, you're talking about a guy who got to 40 home runs before Mookie Betts did this year. I didn't see that one coming, right? So, I mean, that's the most since, looked it up this morning, since Mike Leake back in 2019. So, I mean, you're talking about someone that's an issue, but the question is, where do you deploy him? Because, I mean, you look at 2020, one of the interesting things that they did was, I mean, you saw them kind of sandwich Kershaw and Buehler and throw some rookies in a bullpen game in between that. Now, the question is, Lance Lynn at home, he's had more success. Do you throw him at a home start? Do you throw him in somewhere late in the series? I mean, what's your approach as far as when you use him during the series?
I think it's less about when you use him and then more about who you use him with. I think a Lance Lynn is going to be paired up with like a Ryan Yarbrough, and they're going to say, okay, well, this guy has this kind of stuff, and then let's pair that up with another guy that has exact opposite type of stuff. And by the time you know it, we've gone 3 or 4 times through the lineup, and as long as they're throwing strikes, it's been difficult at bats for the other team. So, hey, whether the Dodgers decide to, make Ryan Yarbrough an opener like we've seen, and then piggyback Lance Lynn off of that, or whether they decide to make Lance Lynn the starter and piggyback a Ryan Yarbrough after that, or whatever combination of guys they choose to use in that combo. I don't think it matters for him. That's the beauty of having a guy like Lance Lynn. That's why I think Ryan Pepio, Bobby Miller, you need to keep them in very familiar routines, because they've never done this before in the postseason. I think with the Lance Lynn, with the Clayton Kershaw, with the Ryan Yarbrough, I think you can get a little bit more creative because they have been there before. They don't have to have everything go perfect for them as far as the routine, and they'll still be able to produce. Does that make any sense?
Makes a ton of sense. And I think that you look at the versatility of a Ryan Yarbrough being a Swiss Army knife for this bullpen. I think for him, I love watching him pitch, man. He makes hitters feel uncomfortable. He misses barrels. He lives low in the zone. I think that that's the benefit they have, is you're not throwing out a starting rotation of guys who all throw 99 plus, right? You got variations right there, and that's how you keep opposing teams off balance. I will say, in all honesty, though, having said that, just kind of the thought of Lance Lynn against this Braves team, I don't want to see him 200 miles from the pitcher's mound that night. But still, like I said, it's baseball. Weird things can happen. And I think Lance Lynn, after the game, one thing he told us that I found very interesting was the first thing he said was the offense did a great job. And you have to remember that if he doesn't walk hitters and gives up a couple of solo shots, it kind of goes with the Clayton Kershaw formula that we've seen the past few seasons. We'll live with a Lance Lynn start where he's going 6 or 7 innings, keeping the bullpen fresh for the other games and letting that offense carry the load. So I definitely think there's a scenario where that happens. So yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, they just don't have very many alternatives, right? And you're going to need something from him. Now, kind of moving down here, Emmet Sheehan to me is very interesting because unsightly ERA, 5.79, 46 2/3 big league innings this year. But he's got that power stuff that can miss bats in the postseason. He's got that four-seam fastball, throws over 60% of the time. That kind of stuff plays up. Now, where do you envision him in the postseason? I feel like not a lot of people talking Emmet Sheehan. I think he could be an X factor.
Yeah, going all the way back to the end of last year, the offseason, the beginning of this year. Well, if you go back to about this time last year, about a month from now, this time last year, he pitched in the Arizona Fall League, and that's when he really started opening people's eyes. He struck 8 hitters out in a row in the Arizona Fall League, and that's a hitter-friendly league. Yeah. And I've said for many different on many different occasions, he has maybe, Bobby Miller, the 101. Yeah. Emmet Sheehan's hit as high as 99, hasn't hit that 0 yet, but he has like 25, 26 inches of right turn to his four seam, so much so that it's actually, his first couple starts at the major league level, they actually listed it as a two seam because it had so much movement on it. So when you're talking about a guy that can hit 97, 98 and turn it right like that, with that, they call it ride and run, that plays against every hitter at every level. And so that's very intriguing. Okay, the thing about him, though, it's been command. So do you trust Emmet Sheehan to go out there and have the command that he needs to have in a huge situation, in a playoff scenario where you have to win that game? So those are all the scenarios that the Dodgers, the front office, they always make the right decisions on these. So Emmet Sheehan could be an X factor. I think he's probably down the list a little bit behind a Ryan Pepio, behind a Bobby Miller, behind a Lance Lynn. I think he's behind a Ryan Yarbrough, and obviously behind a Clayton Kershaw. But if you get down to that level, it'll be, like you say, I mean, are you going to take the stuff, or are you going to take the experience? The Dodgers in the past, it seems like they've always taken the experience. So it'll be interesting to see how they handle that.
And that's something that I'm so curious about, Casey, is with the expectations where they are, with everything that's happened, I think that opened the door with the ability to be creative and go with some of these young guys, and they're not going to blame them for that. I think that fans realize what's happened this year, and they realize all the injuries that they've suffered, but that doesn't mean they don't have a chance to win this postseason. It just means that, hey, give me the stuff that plays up. I mean, you mentioned, 11.4 inches of horizontal movement. I mean, that four-seam fastball moves more than military family. We know that that's the kind of stuff that wins in the postseason. And there's this trade-off. I mean, do you go with vets that throw 91, 92, 93? Do you go with young guys that have explosive stuff and a lack of experience? Or you got Joe Kelly, who's kind of right in between there, right? Who hopefully he gets healthy. Now, any thoughts on Clayton Kershaw? My concern level, I mean, I wake up at 3:30 in the morning in a cold sweat, That's the first thing I think of is the velocity on that fastball right now. But what's your concern level for Clayton Kershaw? And do you think it's a situation where you just kind of have to pitch through it? Or do you think he can get close to being at full strength? Or is he going to be pitching with it basically an ailment throughout this postseason run?
I don't think there's any doubt about it. He's going to be pitching through an ailment through this postseason run. Let's keep this in mind. This could very well be his last one in a Dodger uniform. I mean, it very well could be. I'm not saying that's going to happen, but I think there's some scenarios out there where it could be. So I think you're gonna get a guy that's going to do everything in the next. They've announced that he's going to start tomorrow, I believe, as we record this on a Friday afternoon, and he's been pushed back twice. I mentioned on my show today, Doug, that in my opinion, with all of his experience, he is the one making the decisions here. Hey, when am I going to pitch? How much am I going to pitch? Based on how his body feels. And I think the Dodgers have totally turned that over to him because of his professionalism. So I think he's going to try to pace himself to be as fresh as he possibly can be in the postseason. Here's where we have, the positiveness of this, and, where you can look forward to maybe his stuff playing up a little bit more. When you look at the postseason, man, you're going to get that first round bye. So it's not just the next 17 games. You got a little bit extra time off there. And then also with the way TV does things, man, he might have 10 days in between his two starts. So he's going to be able to recover. I do wish, I said this in the offseason, I wish the Dodgers would have paced him at around 100 innings. I know they couldn't because the race was so tight and you had just all heck breaking loose, if you will, and he was the anchor for so long. So I'm not saying they could have. I don't mean that in a critical way of anybody. I just wish they would have been in position to pace him at 100 innings. I think that would have been optimal. They couldn't do it, but here we are. So I think there's plenty of time for Clayton Kershaw to get healthy enough, I will say, because, hey, in the game of baseball, after about the third day of spring training, nobody's totally healthy. These guys are used to having some kind of nick every time they go out and play. I think he's got plenty of time to get healthy enough before the playoffs start to be very effective. Then he's going to have time enough in between starts when the playoffs do start to get healthy again for his next start.
Yeah, I think you're spot on with all of that. And I think that would have been ideal, right? Around 100 innings, and you really pace him where he can peak at the postseason and really give it everything he has. And look, the reality of the situation with Clayton Kershaw is he's dealt with something basically every year. I mean, you're talking about back stuff, shoulder stuff now. He hasn't pitched more than 127 innings in the regular season since 2019. But I also think you touched on something that I think is really important too, is that this organization in Kershaw, they're in lockstep with everything.
Yes.
It's very mutual. It's very collaborative. And the reality is that if he's healthy, he's going to be out there on the mound because that's what he loves to do. He's not a guy that's going to go Roger Clemens it and go there towards the middle of the season and go for that postseason run. I also think that, you always have to look at every single Clayton Kershaw start as really, I'm a devout Christian. I believe in Christianity. You really have to look at it as a blessing because it's touch and go. You just never know. I mean, I thought back in 2021 when he walked off the mound with a ball in his hands against the Brewers, he was done that year, that he could have hung him out then, because we talk about a guy that's played for 16 years. That's a walking statue. It's a first ballot Hall of Famer. There's really nothing else for that guy to prove, but I guarantee you this guy wants to go out on a high note. And hey, this team, like I said, Casey, we've tried the Pete Kershaw, the Pete Greinke 111 win teams. We've tried everything, right? The 106 win team in 2019. We've tried all that stuff. How about the year where the expectations are low, then you win it this year? So, I mean, look, last year, everyone thought, okay, collision course. The Braves, the Dodgers, hey, guess what? The Phillies and the Padres, they had other plans, right? So I always tell fans out there that, hey, surrender to postseason baseball. Don't make the mistake of trying to make sense of this stuff, okay? If you want to watch a sport like F1 racing where Max Verstappen wins every week, go ahead and do that. Baseball, it's the cruelest game, especially to fans, but